Ladies and gentlemen, what you're going to hear right now on India Ahead is a story that you have never heard before. While we all know that the row has been erupting over Sabarimala over and over again as to whether the entry of women should be allowed inside the holy shrine, the Supreme Court sees no reason whatsoever, as on date, to bar the entry of women who want to go ahead and worship Lord Ayyappa, the reigning deity of the Sabarimala temple. But then, Hindu patriarchs have been waving the red flag. They have said time and again that this is against the tenets of Sabarimala's history. And it's exactly that what we started probing. And as a part of an investigation which was carried out by India Ahead, today we bring to you a 400-year-old scripture, something which has never seen light of the day. A scripture which dates back to 400 odd years, a scripture which owes its roots to the Pandala Maharaja, the custodians of the Sabarimala temple. And you would be shocked to hear what we found out once we started analyzing the scriptures. The scriptures clearly raised doubts on the present agitation. Even today, there were tumultuous scenes playing out inside the Kerala Assembly. Literally, legislators came to blows, a hunger strike outside the state secretariat. It is a political potboiler which is playing to the gallery in God's own country. But what exactly did this scripture tell us in the first place? If you look back at that scripture, and the scripture will be up on our screens in just a bit as we speak, it's right there. It's a copper sheet. And along with that is a letter, which essentially encapsulates what is there outlined in that scripture. It clearly specifies that Sabarimala essentially would be performing tribal rituals. Tribal rituals and not Brahminical rituals, and the entire worship would be carried out by people who are not necessarily Brahmins. So where did the Brahminical hegemony come in from? How and when did it creep in? Have you ever thought about it? Not really. On the other hand, the scripture also challenges the notion being upheld by Ayyappa devotees who say that for ages the entry of women to Sabarimala have been banned. The Supreme Court recently lifted the ban of banning women to enter the Sabarimala shrine, women aged between 10 to 50 years of age group. But the document that we are putting on our screens clearly tells one and all that the entry of women was never barred, and that on a particular holy day, men and women stood shoulder by shoulder and worshipped the reigning deity Lord Ayyappa. All this and much more will tumble out of the closet as we go on revealing over the next 90 minutes. But first, let's run you through this report.
Well, the Sabarimala issue refuses to die down in Kerala, with the Kerala Assembly being adjourned yet again. A secret from the past has now been unveiled. India Ahead has accessed a 400-year-old note that raises a number of questions. The crux of the protests at Sabarimala these past few weeks has been the issue of women being allowed entry into the temple by the Supreme Court. Protesters have questioned the Supreme Court's interference in age-old customs and practices. But this revelatory note suggests that these traditions and practices being cited did not actually exist. The letter written by the Pandala Maharaja that has been preserved in Kochi states that puja at the temple was performed by both genders, male and female. It also states that tribal practices comprise the core of worship at the temple, which undermines the Brahminical heritage that has been frequently cited lately by the temple priests.
Only those things which are stated can be understood from history. Those things which are not stated, we may not be able to fill in the blanks in the way we like. Otherwise, you have to read history in a context.
The note seems to suggest that worship at the temple 400 years ago wasn't dominated by gender and caste-based discrimination, as it has been in the last couple of decades. It also suggests that maybe we need to better scrutinize and understand our history and heritage before making tall claims about custom and tradition. Your report, India Ahead.
Right. So that sets up the premise for the big debate at this point in time. What is it that custodians of Lord Ayyappa have been talking about to tell us that what the Supreme Court has said regarding the entry of women is wrong? What is it that the ancient scripture clearly outlined? Why is it that we see a Brahminical hegemony when it comes to offering prayers at the Sabarimala temple? Where was it specified that only Brahmins will be performing the puja? In fact, if you look at the scriptures and what the scripture outlines, as we said, essentially tribal practices is what is being referred to. And that is exactly what we are going to examine. Let me introduce my colleagues, Rickson Uman, who joins me from Kochi, and Vandana Sebastian Bawa, who joins me from Delhi on the broadcast at this point in time. Now, both of them have been following the story very, very closely. Before I bring in Vandana, let me go across to Kochi now. Rickson, you're standing by, and this is a story that no one has ever told India. Essentially, whatever we are seeing playing out now, even today what happened in the Kerala Assembly, possibly the legislators are not quite aware of what that scripture has told us. Just take our viewers through as to what is it that you have picked up when you look at those scriptures, and we believe that the scriptures are there in a museum in Kochi at this point in time, which completely shed a new light to this ongoing controversy.
That scriptures is here with us, and as you mentioned that the controversy still continues in Kerala regarding who is the custodian of Lord Ayyappa temple. But what we found out here is very shocking, as you mentioned, that as you stated that on the fourth
right, there seems to be an audio issue with Rickson. We'll fix that audio issue just a bit. In fact, right, Rickson, just stay on with us. We'll fix your audio line. Let me bring in my colleague Vandana also on this. Now, Vandana, you know, the details of what is stated in that 400-year-old note, that is up there on our screens. Now, clearly, as someone who's been following this Sabarimala controversy ever since it erupted from the day the Supreme Court decided to throw open the dates of the Sabarimala shrine to women devotees, there has been a lot of anger, a lot of protest, a lot of furor. Vandana, just take us through. You have studied this note very, very closely. What does this note really tell us?
Well, this note is really a revelatory note of sorts, Saurav. It was written by the Pandalam Maharaja 400 years ago. Remember, constantly the main crux of the protest over the last couple of weeks after the Supreme Court verdict has been, protesters have been saying that it's because of custom and tradition that women should not be allowed inside the shrine. But this shrine, the note rather seems to suggest very clearly that that people of both genders, both male and female, are allowed to worship at the shrine. So if this was the case 400 years ago, one really wonders as to why things have changed since. And also the note also talks about how tribal practices really were the predominant factor where worship at this particular shrine is concerned. But we know how, Brahminical hegemony has sort of taken predominance where worship is concerned. We have the priests.
Now, yes, Vandana, since you have outlined what the basic contours are, let me just go one by one. Vandana, now this document clearly questions how an upper caste worship culture was forced to a temple which the Malayara community claims to be theirs once. Now, the tenets, the essential tenets of worship and who has the right to worship, that is being challenged, Vandana, in the first place.
Well, yes, that's a very important point that has been made in that note over there. Because there is this sort of upper class hegemony that has been dominating the entire discourse. We know the kind of the power and influence that has been exerted by the Sabarimala priest, who's been claiming that it's a Brahminical tradition, but this note clearly proves otherwise. It seems to suggest that that tribal customs used to dominate at the shrine 400 years ago. They didn't really have any kind of caste hierarchy. So it looks like all these age-old customs and traditions that are so frequently being cited.
Somewhere down the line, Vandana, as you were saying clearly, that somewhere down the line, what had been pronounced and what had been seen as to be the gospel truth, somewhere down the line, I know all the lines seem to have got blurred. Stay on with us. Let's also bring in our colleague Rickson on the broadcast once again. Now, Rickson, You know, you are there in Kochi, right where the scripture is. Take us through the big revelations coming to the fore. We do know that our established thinking as far as Sabarimala is concerned, and what so-called Ayyappa devotees have been professing loud and clear, all those basic tenets are being questioned, Rickson, with that scripture, with that ancient piece of metal that tells it all.
Exactly, Saurav. Right now we are here in the museum and we have that exclusive copy of the scripture. And as you mentioned that after September 28 historic verdict, we've seen that mass protest by Bharatiya Janata Party and also by other Hindu organizations across all the 40 districts of the state. That these all Hindu region, that organizations are saying that they are conducting this protest to protect the Hindu tradition and custom. But what we can see, when we read the scripture, when we see this copper metal, the words written in this scripture is really shocking, as you mentioned. And also on the fourth consecutive day, we've seen that the Kerala Legislative Assembly was also adjourned due to the Sabarimala issue. A huge word war fight is happening between the opposition leader and between the Chief Minister Pinarayi Vijayan on the Sabarimala issue. There in Kerala Secretariat, we can see BJP is conducting a hunger strike before the Kerala Secretariat. On the other side, Congress is conducting a satyagraha in the Legislative Assembly. But what we are seeing in the scripture is that this is really a official note.
You know what has happened in the Kerala Assembly today, as you have been reporting all day today, Rickson, what has been happening in the Kerala Assembly, tumultuous scenes. But you know, our entire attention at this point in time is riveted on that piece of metal sheet that you have with you at this point in time. Now, for the benefit of our viewers, if you could just ask our camera person colleague to zoom in on that piece of document, Rickson, to show us exactly what that document tells us. Are the instructions on that?
To zoom on this copper metal. But Saurav, this copper metal, this is an official note from the Pandalam Kovil, and it's been written in order by the Majesty in 1843 Tanuva year. The officials in Sabarimala are ordered to function the Magaravalak festivals and following the temples under their management likely. And of the temples under your management in Sabarimala, Tanniyamukam Desha, the Chirapan Chirail Kunjan